Good Shabbos. This week we have a double Parsha Matos Masei, which concludes the book of Bamidbar. And although there's one more book in the Torah, Devarim, that book is really devoted to Moshe's speech to the Jewish people. So in essence, this is the end of what you would call the Torah. And what's interesting, when you look at it that way, is how the Torah ends. When you look at the end of Devarim, it ends with talking about how great Moshe was and that there will never be a prophet like Moshe again. It seems to be very appropriate for the end of the Torah. But this week's Parsha, we end Bamidbar with a story about the Benos Tzalafchad, the daughters of Tzalafchad. And the story goes in an earlier Parsha. They came to Moshe and they said, hey, if inheritance is only to the men and not to the women, we are a family of 5 daughters, there's no men, and our father died, and there's not going to be any inheritance in our family. This is not fair. So Moshe brings their case to God, and he comes back and he says, yeah, you're right. If there's no men in the family, then women should inherit. This might not sound so great in today's society, but it was progressive in the time, in ancient times, in the time of Moshe, that women would sometimes inherit the land. That was a little while ago. In this week's parsha, we have the people from the Shevet, the tribe which the daughters of Tzalafchad were part of, coming to complain to Moshe and saying, hey, if these women now marry outside of our tribe, and then they die, they're going to inherit the land of their father, and then when they die, the land will go to their husband's family, and it will leave our tribe. That's not fair. So they say to Moshe, we have to correct this. So Moshe goes to these women, and he says, please, only marry within your tribe, and they agree, and everyone lives happily ever after. And that's how the Torah ends. You think this is a strange story to end the Torah. But if you think about it, this Torah really is ending in a similar vein as it started. What is one of the first stories, is the first story really in the book of Bereshit, besides the creation of human beings? It's the story of Adam and Chava, of Adam and Eve, and their sin in the Garden of Eden. And what happens? Eve, Chava, gives the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge, to Adam, to her husband, and because of that, they're both cursed. But the curse of Chava, of Eve, is more severe than that to Adam. And one of the curses it says is, V'hu yimshabach, he, meaning man, will rule over you. And that seems to be a curse and something negative that happens to Chava. And one way of interpreting it is that before this sin of eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, or men and women, would be completely equal partners. There would not be any domination of one over the other. And therefore, I would read that as that's the ideal. The ideal exists in the Garden of Eden, before men sinned, before women sinned, before there was any problems within our society. There was completely a co-equal relationship between the different sexes. And then things go downhill from there. What's happening perhaps with the daughters of Tzalafchad is there's a movement towards that original equality. And their first complaint, they're moving it slowly but surely. Women are completely left out of the inheritance, and then they get sort of a foothold into inheritance that at least if there's no men, the women will get something. That's not the ideal, but it's moving towards that ideal. But then at the end of the parsha, at the end of the book of Bamidbar, the people in the tribe are saying, hey, we are not so happy with that, because if women start taking over part of the land, we're going to lose our rights, which are we inherit from within our tribe, and within the tribe, all inheritance goes by the men, and they're basically saying, hey, we want to keep this within men's society. We don't want women to have it and start getting it and splitting it and spreading it out amongst the different tribes. And in a sense, we can go back a step and say, hey, what's wrong with that? That would actually be good. Today, for example, nobody knows if they're from the tribe of Reuven or Shimon or Levi or Yehuda. We don't have that many tribes left after the 10 lost tribes, but still, we don't really know our tribes. Besides the tribe of Levi and the Kohanim, which are a subset in the tribe of Levi, we don't really know what tribe we belong to. And is that bad? No, it seems to be good. We're all one united Jewish people. There's equality. So in a sense, just like we want equality between men and women, wouldn't it be good if there was equality between all the tribes, and the differences and the boundaries that exist between the tribes would break down and everyone would live as one big happy family? So it seems that this is a throwback. The people are saying, no, we don't want that. We don't want complete equality. The nature of human beings is to constantly compete. And although we want to strive for the ideal, they're saying it won't necessarily work. And on a simple level, it won't work even with men and women. And there's this pushing and pulling and this tension that exists between the need for equality and the recognition that most people don't really appreciate equality. They want control. Now, that's not a good thing, but it just might be the nature of human beings. So what the Torah here might be representing is, in the last story, they're trying to show that there's a movement towards equality, and that at the end of the day, the movement is not going to be 100%. It's going to go slowly but surely. And if you go too fast, there's always a pushback from the rest of society. So on the one hand, this is a very negative story. It's saying that whatever equality the women were getting, it's still going to be only a small step, and it won't be anything substantial. On the other hand, what it's saying is that you see that change is actually possible, that we look towards an ideal and we strive to get back to that equality. God is on board. When the women complain and Moshe goes to God with her complaint, he's willing to think about it and understand it, and actually seemingly on the surface changes the law in order to have more equality. But there's a realization that although we might have an ideal, we have to take it in small steps. So on the one hand, we're stuck in the past. On the other hand, there's a recognition that we can move into the future, that we're moving slowly but surely, and eventually what we really want to get is that complete and pure equality. So you see that equality starting to happen, and there's a statement here saying that we can move the needle, we could change things, but it has to be done in this progressive manner. If you even think about it, when you read something like the book of Esther and the story of Esther, you start seeing where changes in a sense occur. In that story, Esther rises from just being the wife of Achashverosh and the stepdaughter of Mordechai, and in a position where she's always has to follow the instructions of the men, and as the story unfolds, Esther becomes the leader. Esther becomes Esther Hamalka, the queen, and she's the one who's directing what's happening in the court of Achashverosh with Haman, and she's the one who makes sure that Mordechai gets to a position of power. So she's the one who raises Mordechai to that position, and ultimately when we really think of Purim, we think of the story of Esther. We think it's all about Esther, and there's a movement towards equality, and this is a constant tension within all societies, which we feel up to and including today. And there's a tension within Jewish law, how equal we do see the sexes. And not everyone is always happy with the progress that happens, but there are movements in that direction, and we just have to understand that halacha is by nature very conservative. It's something which takes time and has to go through different steps until it eventually progresses back to that sort of Edenic ideal where men and women are completely equal, that all tribes are completely equal, and that all men and women are completely equal. Good Shabbos.